Let's get right into it. Number 6. A class divided by hate. Picture a small Iowa classroom in 1968, third graders sitting at their desks, completely unaware they're about to become part of one of the most disturbing psychological experiments ever conducted on children. Their teacher, Jane Elliott, walks in with a simple announcement. Blue-eyed children are superior. They're smarter, cleaner, better behaved. Brown-eyed children were inferior, slower, less intelligent. The blue-eyed kids get extra recess, second helpings at lunch, front row seats. The brown-eyed kids have to wear colored collars around their necks. Like marking cattle, they use separate water fountains, get criticized for every tiny mistake. Within hours, these sweet kids transform into something unrecognizable. The blue-eyed children become little tyrants. They taunt their brown-eyed classmates, call them names. One shy blue-eyed boy suddenly becomes a confident bully. The brown-eyed kids crumbled. Confident children can't solve simple math problems anymore. They slump in their chairs. Some cry. Their test scores actually drop, just from being told they're inferior. Day 2 arrives. Elliot flips everything, now saying brown-eyed children are superior, and blue-eyed kids are the inferior ones. The collars switch necks. Now the brown-eyed kids, remembering their humiliation, sometimes dish out the same cruelty. The blue-eyed girl who was dominant yesterday became quiet and submissive today. These children internalized discrimination based on eye color. Friendships meant nothing. Cruelty became easy, all because an authority figure said one group was better. The truly creepy part is this works on adults too. Elliot repeated this experiment in corporate settings, on television shows. Grown adults quickly adopted the same discriminatory behaviors. They turned on each other just as fast as the children did. It shows how easily anyone can create an us versus them mentality, how quickly we'll hurt others when told we're superior, how fast we'll believe we're worthless when told we're inferior. All it takes is someone in charge drawing an arbitrary line. Number 5. The Rat Decapitation Study. Back in the 1920s, a psychologist named Carney Landis wondered if all humans make the same facial expressions when they feel the same emotions, like a universal sad or surprised face. Landis gathered a group of participants, mostly students. To better track their facial muscle movements, he drew dark cork lines all over their faces. Imagine sitting there, your face looking like a weird road map, waiting for the emotional roller coaster. Then he exposed them to a series of experiences. Some were pretty standard, if a bit unpleasant. Smelling ammonia, which stings your nose like crazy, listening to jazz music, looking at what was considered shocking material at the time. Participants were told to put their hand into a bucket filled with slimy frogs. Without looking, you can imagine the faces people made for that one. Participants were presented with a live white rat. First, they were instructed to watch as Landis went to decapitate it with a knife. If a participant recoiled or showed distress, Landis handed them the knife. He told them to behead the rat themselves. You're a student, lines drawn all over your face, and now a psychologist is pressuring you to kill an animal with your own hands. The really disturbing part is about 2/3 of the participants actually went through with it, even though many were clearly horrified and had no experience doing such a thing. For those who refused, Landis would often do it himself, right in front of them. After photographing all those stressed-out, frog-slimed, rat-traumatized faces, he concluded there were no universal facial expressions. People reacted with a huge variety of expressions, even to the same stimuli. The experiment basically failed to prove his initial idea. Instead, Landis mostly proved that people will do some pretty shocking things when asked by an authority figure in a lab coat, and he created one of psychology's most ethically questionable experiments in the process. The images of those cork-lined faces, contorted in real distress, are hard to forget. Number 4. Kids attack Bobo doll. In 1961, psychologist Albert Bandura wanted to know if kids copy violent behavior, so he set up an experiment that would make modern ethics boards faint. He brought in 72 preschoolers and split them into groups. Some kids watched an adult absolutely demolish an inflatable clown doll. The adult punched it, kicked it, hit it with a hammer, and screamed things like, "Sock him in the nose." Other kids watched an adult play nicely with toys, completely ignoring the clown. And a third group didn't see any adult at all. The researchers let each kid play with some amazing toys for exactly 2 minutes. Then they told the kid those toys are for other children. Next, they put the child in a room with regular toys and that same inflatable clown doll. Kids who watched the violent adult went absolutely berserk on that clown. They didn't just copy what they saw, they invented new ways to attack it. Some grabbed toy guns that the adult never even touched. They repeated the exact phrases they heard. word for word. Meanwhile, kids who saw the peaceful adult mostly ignored the clown. The experiment proved that kids are like recording devices with legs. They see violence, they do violence, and they think it's perfectly normal. Bandura basically taught innocent children to be aggressive for science. These kids went from playing peacefully to beating up a doll because an adult showed them it was okay. The experiment changed how we think about TV violence and video games forever. Imagine being 4 years old, and some scientists just programmed you to be violent. Number 3. Robbers Caveboy War. Imagine sending your kid to summer camp for some wholesome outdoor fun. Now imagine finding out they were secretly part of a psychological experiment that turned them into tiny warriors. This very scenario unfolded in 1954 at Robbers Cave State Park in Oklahoma. Psychologist Muzaffar Sharif wanted to see how quickly regular kids could be turned against each other, so he gathered 22 11-year-old boys, all from similar backgrounds. None of them knew each other, and none of them knew they were lab rats. The boys were split into 2 groups and kept completely separate at first. One group called themselves the Rattlers. The other became the Eagles. For a week, each group did normal camp stuff. Swimming, hiking, making friends. They had no idea another group even existed. The researchers introduced the groups through competition. Baseball games, tug of war, capture the flag. Winners got trophies and pocket knives. Losers got nothing. Within days, these normal kids turned vicious. It started with name-calling. The Eagles called the Rattlers stinkers. The Rattlers claimed the baseball field as their territory. Then things escalated. They raided each other's cabins at night. They burned each other's flags. They stockpiled green apples as weapons. Actual fistfights broke out. The researchers weren't just watching. They were secretly making things worse. After turning these kids into enemies, Sharif tried to fix what he'd broken. First, he just had them eat meals together. That led to food fights. The researchers staged fake emergencies that required teamwork. The water supply mysteriously failed. Both groups had to work together to find the problem. The food truck broke down. Everyone had to pull it with a rope. Slowly, the shared struggles started breaking down the walls. By the end, the boys actually chose to ride home on the same bus. They even pooled their prize money for milkshakes. These kids never consented to being turned into each other's enemies. Their parents thought they were sending them to regular summer camp. Instead, their children became unwitting subjects in a study about manufacturing hatred. The experiment showed how easily normal people can be manipulated into tribal warfare. All it takes is some competition and a little push from authority. Number 2. Silencing orphan children. Imagine scientists trying to deliberately break a child's ability to speak, just to see if they could. This very scenario unfolded in 1939 at the University of Iowa. The experiment was run by a speech. All it takes is some competition and a little push from authority. Number 2. Silencing orphan children. Imagine scientists trying to deliberately break a child's ability to speak, just to see if they could. This very scenario unfolded in 1939 at the University of Iowa. The experiment was run by a speech pathologist named Wendell Johnson and his graduate student Mary Tudor. Their test subjects were 22 orphan children. Some already had stutters. Most spoke perfectly fine. The researchers split the kids into groups. One group of children who stuttered received positive speech therapy. They were praised and encouraged. But another group got something very different. These kids spoke normally, but Tudor told them they were developing a stutter. Every time they hesitated or repeated a word, things all kids do, she'd say, "Don't do that. You're starting to stutter." She'd tell them to use their willpower, to never speak unless they could do it right. These were orphans, now being told by an authority figure that something was deeply wrong with how they spoke. The kids who received this negative treatment didn't suddenly develop clinical stutters, but many became incredibly self-conscious about speaking. They became quiet, anxious. Some refused to speak altogether. Their grades dropped. They showed signs of psychological distress. The cruel irony is Johnson himself had a stutter. He theorized stuttering was learned behavior, that overcritical adults could induce it, so he tried to create stutterers in orphan children. The study was never formally published. Mary Tudor returned to the orphanage 3 times trying to reverse the damage, but for some kids, it was too late. In 2001, Iowa awarded money to surviving orphans from the negative therapy group, acknowledging the lifelong scars they endured. The experiment became known as the Monster Study, a fitting name for research that treated vulnerable children like lab rats. Number 1. Making little Albert fear. Back in 1920, psychologists John Watson and Rosalie Rayner decided to see if they could teach a baby to be afraid of something. Their subject was a 9-month-old infant they called Little Albert. First, they showed Albert a white rat. The baby reached out to touch it. He wasn't scared at all. They also showed him a rabbit, a dog, some cotton wool, and a Santa mask. Albert played with them all. Every time Albert reached for the white rat, Watson would stand behind him and smash a steel bar with a hammer. Imagine that sudden, terrifyingly loud clang right behind a baby's head. Naturally, Albert would burst into tears. They did this over and over. Rat. Loud noise. Soon, just seeing the white rat made little Albert cry and try to crawl away. He had learned to fear the rat, even without the scary noise. Albert's fear had spread to other furry objects too. The rabbit also scared him. The dog terrified him. A fur coat made him fearful. Even that Santa Claus mask now sent him into distress. The experiment ended abruptly because Albert and his mother moved away. Watson and Rayner never got to undo the fear they'd created. For years, his true identity was a mystery. Some researchers later identified him as Douglas Merritt, who sadly passed at age 6 from an unrelated illness. Another theory identified him as William Barger. Relatives of Barger reported he had a lifelong aversion to animals, especially dogs. This experiment is now considered wildly unethical. You can't deliberately traumatize a baby for science today, but the story of little Albert remains a chilling reminder of how far some researchers were willing to go. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.